We're going to talk a little bit today about what I would like to call the cloud paradox, but we're going to focus a lot on how to optimize your use of cloud and save costs while integrating security. So I talk about the cloud paradox often because I would say I'm seeing this from a cybersecurity element, and one of the most invisible costs that I think people don't take into account when they're building out cloud are the security costs. Oftentimes, when people make the decision to move from on-prem into cloud, they're often thinking just about the benefits that they get on the other end. They're really minimizing what either the risks are or those invisible costs. Oftentimes, we've seen about 70% of businesses are starting to think twice about their expenditures in cloud, figuring out that sometimes with the lack of planning, there's uncontrolled spend, or they're finding that they have more resources than they needed, or are using systems and tools that may not be aligned with their particular environment. So what we're seeing is that 30% of cloud spending leads to waste, but it also could be mitigated and minimized by better management of cloud overall. We're also seeing that the companies that started in cloud with specific budgets, oftentimes using 3 or 5 year plans, they're actually going beyond their budgets and spending way more than anticipated. But there are also ways that we can sort of think about cloud in a new way. And one of the ways that when I first got introduced to cloud, it was this kind of amorphous sort of someone else's server, we're putting data places where we can't see. And so some people embraced it as early adopters and said, wow, this makes perfect sense. It removes the need to have the cloud on site or takes them out of our data centers. And what they started to think about was, we're going to give our cloud and the liability and the management to another company better suited to do it. The idea was really fundamentally around this shared resources model, economies of scale, meaning if one company builds multiple data centers with the idea that parts of that data center or parts of those resources will be shared among many companies, then companies might spend less in order to get access to similar quality of data and management. What wasn't talked about in the beginning was the issue with security. So there is a security conundrum in that you want to have access to the best tools, but you also want to ensure that the cost of security is built into the way in which organizations are actually building out their cloud infrastructure. We know today that the cost of security and cloud governance, the mismanagement of cloud governance and security leads to about 50% of the incidents we're seeing. So it's not enough to put the information in the cloud. Organizations are actually facing repercussions of actually not having a strategic security plan in place to handle misconfigurations, to ensure there are people who have the ability and the skills to properly manage cloud, to ensure there isn't data leakage, to ensure that they're actually giving the right access to the right people inside the organization. We're also seeing that the cost of breaches are going up. Why? Especially in cloud native companies, primarily because we're noticing that the cloud misconfigurations are based on data that may not be used often, is data that was sensitive and no longer useful to the company, but hasn't been disposed of. And then what we're finding is that the company is having two different conversations. The security team is talking about how to protect the data in the cloud, and the IT team is talking about how to optimize and manage the cloud. And sometimes those two teams aren't talking. All of this leads to a fundamental issue with trust. And it also impacts the bottom line because in the way IT and security organizations run, they might have different budget line items that often don't consider a duplication of effort. They don't consider what could be used together to minimize cost. It also doesn't take into consideration planning that will allow for both teams to collaboratively work and optimize the cost of cloud overall. So it's impossible for the board or the C-suite to really see the full cost of cloud because they're being handled in silos. Ultimately, security, cloud, cost, they go hand in hand because we figured out that the better we're able to bring security at the beginning of the conversation, the better we're able to bridge security and IT teams, the less cost we see overall, because then there is an openness about what both teams need and how they can work together to get a better cloud management process in place.